You could see what's happening with Kamala Harris, and I see it very clearly, just even with the pick of Tim Walz. Tim Walz won in a red district. He was a Democratic guy, a working class, man of the people, regular guy teacher who went into a district that was mostly red and had a little bit of blue, and he won the trust and support and love of red and blue alike. And that district became a purple district. So he's a gun owner, a veteran of the National Guard, a teacher, a working class guy. He's not a bought out special interest. He's not a fancy Yale graduate. He's not an Ivy League tech bro kid. He's just a regular dude, but he won in a red district. He was a football coach. So you could see what Kamala's position was. If we look at it, you can chart the course. She knew that Joe Biden is hated by the far left because of his support of Israel. She also knew that she was going to continue to support Israel. And I agree with it. As heartbroken as I am that the Palestinian people are suffering the brunt of the pain in the Middle East, it's like Hamas murdered people at a music festival knowing full well that Israel was going to smite the entire region afterwards. They knew Israel would have the biggest overreaction on the planet, and they did it anyway. So imagine what Hamas would do if we left Israel vulnerable and undefended. You know they would go in there and devastate as much of Israel as possible. And there's no way you can convince me that if you took away all the weapons from Israel, that Hamas would just stop killing Israeli people. I don't believe that for a second. They would severely undermine and attack and do as much damage to Israel as possible. So leaving Israel undefended and without weapons is never going to happen. I don't think it can happen as long as Hamas has enough power to wreak havoc over there. So if you look at what Kamala Harris did, I think she was very strategic. She knew that Joe Biden was underwater, that he was being held responsible. She knew that he was Genocide Joe. But you know what else Kamala Harris knew, guys? You know what else she knew? She knew that certain factions of the far left would also do the same thing to her. And they have. Killer Kamala, Holocaust Harris, right? They did it. We knew they were going to do it. Everybody called us like Biden defenders or whatever, or Biden riding with Biden, whatever. You know, forever Biden, whatever. I've been called Blue MAGA. But we knew that the far, far, far lefties were all going to go after Kamala too. We knew it. Why? Because the United States is always going to arm Israel, period. End of story. That's never going to change unless, like, Muslims overthrow the U.S. government and take over America. The U.S. government is never going to leave Israel vulnerable in the Middle East, and nor do I think they should. I think if the U.S. doesn't protect Israel, Israel would be gone. It's like Taiwan, bro. The only reason Taiwan is because the U.S. is backing Taiwan. If the U.S. turned their back on Taiwan, China would be in there in 2 seconds. If the U.S. turned their back on Israel, it would be a matter of time before Iran and the other extremist nations in there just pounded through Israel and decimated them. It's like there's just no way about it. And you're right. The land that Israel sits on is some of the most valuable land and property to the United States in the entire world. You know, you can say it's imperialist, you could say all this shit, but it's just true. It's just true. And so it pains me because I'm watching some of the content creators I know. Like, you know, I love Hassan, but I'm watching Hassan get all fucking twisted because I don't know what Hassan thinks is going to happen. Like, I love his passion and I know he's fighting for a cause he believes in. But it's like, Hassan, buddy, the U.S. is never going to stop arming Israel, bro. Like, you have to exist in the reality of how important Israel is to U.S. global interests. and how critical that area is for us to staunchly defend. It's the same with Ukraine. Ukraine is like the doormat to the rest of Europe. And Israel is like the linchpin between the Middle East, Asia, and Europe. And the United States being empowered and having a sense of control there is of epic proportions globally. And that is never, ever going to change. So we have to figure out, how can we fix this knowing that that's never going to change? So as long as Hamas attacks a music festival, or as long as Hamas bombs any part of Israel, there's going to be a massive overreaction that's going to be funded by the United States. This has been kind of true. That's the situation we're in. Now, you can say right or wrong. Is it wrong for the U.S. to fund Israel? Is it wrong for Hamas to be killing Israelis? Yes, to both those questions. Yes, it's wrong that the U.S. helps Israel, and yes, it's wrong that Hamas is killing Israeli people. But it doesn't change the reality. The reality is, as long as there's factions of whatever group in the Middle East that want to eradicate Israel, the United States is going to give Israel as many fucking bombs as they can handle to prevent those forces from having any power in that region where Israel sits. That's the reality of the world that we live in. And I don't see that reality changing unless, like, every nation in the world bands together and decides to take on the United States. That's it. That's what we have, bro. That's the fucking situation. And now that the Ukraine thing is happening and Russia has been severely weakened, who's the ally going to be to Iran? Who's going to help Iran in the Middle East? Nobody. Russia's not going to be able to do it. I don't think China's going to get involved because China's entire economy is U.S. manufacturing. China is building their economic base and becoming a world superpower by partnering with the United States and manufacturing cheap goods for our country's consumption. So China is not going to fucking help Iran do shit and maybe lose all their factories, go back to being a piss poor third world country. No fucking way. China's not getting involved. The Ukraine has made sure Russia's not getting involved. So the U.S., I don't see any other way of doing it. Now, the question becomes, how do you help the Palestinian people, though, in that situation? Because the U.S. is going to continue giving Israel weapons, period. And I believe they need to. I believe it is the right choice to prevent Israel from being wiped out and to prevent the U.S. from losing a significant toehold in that region. Now, what they could do, right, is people in Israel could vote out Netanyahu and they could get a different leader in Israel. They could get a different leader in Israel, for sure. That's an option. They could, also go to Palestine and lobby Hamas and Iran to stop trying to eradicate Israel. I don't know how far that would get them, but really, you can replace the government of Israel, or you can make appeals to Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah and those other groups there and try to get them to change their way of operating. But other than those two choices, the U.S. is never going to give an arms embargo. Never. Okay? Now, that's the reality, though, that Kamala knew. When Kamala became the presidential nominee, she knew this. She knew she was going to continue supporting Israel. She knew the U.S. government was going to continue supporting Israel, including weapons. Everybody in the U.S. government knows that's true. Even the ones who are fighting against it, like Rashida Tlaib, she's very strongly wants to stop it, but I think she knows that it's going to continue. She's fighting it because it's her people, and of course she's going to fight for it and speak up about it, and good for her. She has the right to do that. But even she knows that the U.S. is going to continue funding Israel. Kamala knew this. So Kamala knew that a bunch of people were just going to continue blaming Joe for Gaza, and a whole bunch of people were going to be excited enough about her and knowing that her wanting to do something good for the Palestinian people too was going to be enough to win some of that left. But she knew that there were going to be Holocaust Harris and Killer Kamala signs. She knew that there were going to be large far left influencers that were going to not like her and fuck around. So what did she do? She grabbed Tim Walz. She grabbed a guy who is a Democratic, progressive, populist guy in a purple / partially red district to go and be a voice for those moderate, middle of the road and some Republican, maybe socially progressive Republican voters. She's going to appeal to the middle of America and say, I'm sorry to the far left. And I think that's a good move. You know why? Because I don't think the far left is a reliable ally, guys. I don't. I think if you look at them over the last 10, 15 years, they always get hung up on some single issue or some single action that a politician took. And they're too resentment-based. Why are they resentment-based? Because they don't want to be in the Democratic Party. The far left actually hate the Democrats. They do. They hate the Democrats, and they're resentful having to caucus with them in the first place. They always feel like they're not far left enough. They're not being extreme enough. You know what I'm saying? So they're an unreliable ally, because even if you give them what they want, you know that a year from now, they're going to have some other major issue because of one thing you did that they will harshly judge and they will see as unforgivable. That's how they operate. That is how they've operated forever. And that's really a big thing. Kamala Harris knows that some of the leftists actually do hate the Democratic Party. And even though she's far left, I think she's fairly left. She definitely has some middle of the road qualities about her, having been a prosecutor and a law and order type. So if you see what Kamala did was she took a right-wing appealing Democrat, Tim Walz, on her ticket. And then the whole convention, guys, was really about olive branch. If you look at the Democratic convention, it was not polarizing. It was an olive branch. It was Republicans saying, hey, there's room for us here. Hey, we can fight extremism in the Republican Party. Hey, we can work together. Hey, we all kind of want some of the same things. Hey, we're not going to judge you if you're from a different party. We can all gang together and protect our democracy and take care of our people. And I thought that was a really smart move. And she did a couple other things about being very pro-military, very pro-law and order. And I think some of that is actually Kamala Harris. She was a prosecutor. She does believe in law and order. She does believe in sort of protection and safety. I don't think she believes in it the same way that Donald Trump does. I don't believe Kamala Harris would ever turn the military on our own citizens, et cetera, et cetera. But you could tell that she catered that speech so that middle Americans who might vote for a Republican but don't like Donald Trump will vote for her. And I praise her for it because she had to do it, because ultimately there's really no way for her to dig herself out of the hole with the genocide crew. The people that are Genocide Joe, Genocide Killer Kamala, whatever, those people are I don't know how they're going to dig their way out of a hole. They have dug themselves in a hole where now every American politician from this point forward that has a chance at winning an election is going to be unamenable to them. They're not going to be able to support a mainstream candidate ever again. They won't. But so I think Kamala was very shrewd. Now, what's going to be interesting, though, is it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the far left. What are they going to do now? Are they just going to turn into Jimmy Dore? Is that their path? Because now they're going to be more and more the enemy of the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party is never going to appease them. So they're either going to have to drop the genocide shit, or they're going to have to hold on to the genocide thing and find a new political party and become like, inconsequential. I'm really curious over the next 4 years, 8 years, 10 years, what's going to happen to those people? Because I feel like they've gone so far over the line that I don't know how they get back. Like, once you've decided that everybody in the Democratic Party is a genocide perpetrator, then you can't ever return to the Democratic Party. And the Republicans are even worse, so they're not going there. So what are they going to do? They're just going to sit there and be a negative voice in the Democratic Party, and then the Democratic Party will stop acknowledging them at all? Like, yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I've been wondering about this, though, because once I saw them calling him Genocide Joe, I was like, dude, they're so... The far left is so... They are. They called him Genocide Joe, and now they're like calling her Holocaust Harris, and now they're because what's going to happen is the Democratic Party is just going to appeal to the middle and forget about them. And I don't even know how they garner local support, because the problem is if you went door to door in America, I like 7 out of 10 people would support Israel. That's just facts. Easy, 7 out of 10 would support Israel. Of course. I mean, it's weird because I saw these lefties that went and they, Killer Kamala Holocaust Harris at the DNC, and it didn't even move the needle. They didn't get a speaker. The news barely covered their protests. Nobody fucking cared about that shit. Nobody fucking cared. And the thing is the far lefties think they have such a huge movement, but they don't. They don't realize that if you go back to like the civil rights movement, you go back to like Vietnam, it wasn't 500 people at a convention. It was everybody. When you went to Vietnam, every college student in America was protesting. There were so many protesters that people were getting shot trying to corral the protesters. They were nationwide. It was like everybody was protesting the Vietnam War. Everybody. All the musicians, all the college students, a lot of people that were coming back from the conflict were speaking up about it. Soldiers themselves. It was widespread. It was rampant. There were huge figures of the civil rights movement that was simultaneously being fought that were also speaking up about it. There were coalitions of the civil rights movement people with the anti-war movement people. And it was like this cultural revolution that even international musicians, the Beatles were writing about this shit. You know what I'm saying? Look at what happened to John Lennon. He became an anti-war activist. Like, this was like, it was like the whole fucking world was in on this shit. And this Israel-Hamas conflict is not like that. 70% of America supports Israel and thinks America should let them do what they need to do. And they want to provide humanitarian aid for the Palestinians, and they want Hamas to stop attacking music festivals so there's no more war. And now I believe there's an opportunity where there's enough goodwill for the Palestinian people that if Hamas and Hezbollah and those other groups knock it off, maybe there can be a peaceable resolution where it's not oppressive from Israel to the Palestinians. But I don't know, man. It's hard because Hamas and Hezbollah and those groups have never stopped the violence. This Gaza thing, as horrific as the overreaction is, and it is, it's horrific like the U.S. dropping an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. That was a horrific overreaction, but the U.S. did it to make a point. And the thing is all of this started when Hamas killed a bunch of kids who went to a fucking music festival. So at the end of the day, you can cry genocide all you want, but the thing that you're crying genocide about happened because a group of terrorists killed a bunch of kids who were just going to see music that had nothing to do with anything. They killed them. I guess they took some hostages. They did it out of the blue. So It's not like Israel just woke up one day and leveled all of Gaza. No, they woke up one day and a bunch of teenagers and young adults went to a music festival and ended up dead and hostages, and then they fucking leveled the place. And even though I will agree that it is an overreaction, to me, it is slightly understandable. If there's a bunch of tension between two groups over there, and one group goes into a music festival and kills a bunch of young people for no fucking reason other than taking some MDMA and dancing to music, an overreaction to just devastate the people who did that, to me, that kind of makes sense. You know, it's horrific, but I can see why people would overreact. But what I don't understand is this. I don't understand, why did Hamas kill those people at the music festival? They most certainly knew Israel was going to level all of Gaza. If you look at the history, we know this is coming. They knew the U.S. was going to arm it. So why did they do it? Why did they, out of the blue, just decide to carve up a bunch of people at a music festival? Like, why would they do that? What kind of human beings do that? People that want peace do not do that, right? They don't want peace. If you want peace, you don't go to a music festival and just murder everybody there. You don't. You cannot convince me that they wanted peace with that. I'm serious. You cannot say that those people wanted peace. Hamas wanted war, and they got one. And they've put all of their people in the bullseye, in the crosshairs, because of it. It's like, dude, that's fucked up, bro. Like, you have to wonder, why did Hamas do that? They knew the overreaction was coming. They knew that their people were going to get decimated afterwards, but they did it. Why did they do it? And until you can answer why they did that, the U.S. is going to give Israel all the bombs they want. And as horrific as knowing what's going to happen because of that, I also do sort of understand why the United States is doing that. Hamas are not freedom fighters. They're not. They're chaos agents. And they very much, the Hamas people, want all of Israel to be eradicated. And they would let all their people die in order to get it. That's the thing that's really hard about that shit. Like, I just don't believe Hamas has any goodwill there whatsoever. So I don't know how you fix that conflict, to be honest with you. I don't. But I am really proud of Kamala Harris for not disarming Israel. And I know there's a bunch of like lefties that they keep blocking me and telling me that I'm a genocide supporter. But I was like, guys, I own property 20 minutes away from a native reservation. I'm clearly already a genocide supporter. If you live in America, you're a fucking genocide supporter. And I don't want to be a genocide supporter. I want to actually help the people that are being genocided. But unfortunately, as long as there are groups like Hamas that are continually doing stupid things like killing innocent people at music festivals, there's going to be a pummeling of all of the areas where those Hamas people hang out. And that's just the reality of it. I understand there's oppression going on in Gaza and has been for some time. And there's definitely oppression going on in the West Bank. But what I don't understand is if the start of building worldwide sympathy for your cause begins with you massacring 1,000 teenagers at a music festival, I don't really think it's going to have the long-range effect. I don't think everybody's really going to get in on your side with this. You know, that's like really hard. It's really hard to engage in a horrific act of civilian murder, and then when the people come back and just decimate all of your buildings, then you say, look at how bad these people who are decimating us are. But it's like, yo, you did do something there. You did do a horrific attack on a bunch of completely innocent people that had nothing to do with nothing. And whether you deserve it or not, or whether you think they deserve it, they definitely didn't deserve it. If Hamas wanted to get together and go attack Netanyahu and go bomb his palace and try to overthrow Netanyahu and have a war wherever Netanyahu is, by all means, go do that. If you had an issue with Netanyahu and you want to go try to kill him, have at it. But to go to a fucking music festival and just kill a bunch of like my kid goes to music festivals. You know what I'm saying? To think that those motherfuckers would go to a music festival where young people are just going to listen to music and for no reason at all just massacre them and think that there's not going to be some type of like payback for that? Like, come on, bro. They fucked over the Palestinian people. Hamas did the minute they did that. But yes, there had to be a goal because Hamas knew what was coming. They knew that once they did that, Netanyahu was going to rain hellfire down upon them. And he was going to be unrelenting until the back of Hamas was broken. They knew that. And the thing about it is, even though, like, I find that horrific because I don't think violence is really an answer, but I do understand the impulses. And it doesn't mean it's justified. It doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. And to be honest with you, as horrific as it is with the devastation going on in Gaza, the thing that started it was mass murder of innocent kids at a music festival. So you can be mad at the overreaction, and you can be mad at the IDF, and you can be mad at Hamas, and you can be mad at the U.S. government. But ultimately, if those Hamas fighters had not murdered those kids at the music festival, Gaza would still be standing right now. That doesn't mean Gaza would be free. It doesn't mean the quality of life would be great there, but it would not be rubble. And what I don't understand with the leftists in America is why have they forgotten about the thing that started this? Somebody explain that to me. I don't understand. I have a genuine lack of understanding about this because I presume that it's because of the decades of tensions and skirmishes going back and forth and oppression and all that. And so I understand Hamas wanting to strike back. I understand Palestinian people feeling oppressed and wanting to go break some windows. But what I don't understand is why murder people? Because obviously murdering innocent kids at the music festival is not getting them what they wanted. It got complete and utter devastation, which I think is probably creating more Hamas, which is going to create more music festival murder, which is going to create more turning Gaza into rubble and so on and so forth. And so maybe everybody got what they wanted. Because I think Netanyahu, I bet he loved the fact in a way that Hamas did that, because now he's like, fuck it, we're going to gut the entire place. Because you know Netanyahu's wanted to reduce Gaza to rubble. I think he's wanted to, and I think Hamas wants to reduce Israel to rubble. But my question is why did Hamas do, they seem to have done the very thing to guarantee that Gaza would end up as rubble. Like, could you think of anything worse they could have done? What could Hamas have done that was worse than just going up to a music festival out in the desert and murdering and torturing everybody there? They could not have done anything worse than that. It's like, dude, if you go to a music festival and you kill a bunch of innocent kids there, your homeland may end up as rubble. You know what I mean? If you want something from somebody, you don't murder 1,000 innocent people. If you want somebody to kick your ass and destroy everything around you, you murder 1,000 innocent people. Because everyone's talking about Israel and the war crimes of the overreaction. But what I don't understand is, what about just murdering 1,000 people at a music festival? That is literally an unprovoked crime against humanity. And it's unconscionable. Like, that's what's really hard. I don't know how we navigate that. Israel has way more power than the Palestinian people. And so you are right. that the burden is on Israel. But the problem is like the Palestinian people versus Hamas. That's the problem. Because, is Hamas the government of the Palestinian people? And like, where do the Palestinian people stand? Are they disavowing Hamas? Because I don't know that they are. Because you're right, Israel has way more power than the Palestinian people. And Hamas is the one provoking Israel. And Israel is, decimating the Palestinian people while trying to eradicate Hamas. But what about the Palestinian people and Hamas? The Palestinian people aren't getting rid of Hamas. And in fact, I don't know if it's true or not, but it seems like they protect Hamas or feel like Hamas is fighting for them. So that's going to be a tough scenario, because as long as you're aligned with terrorists who will go in and just murder people at a music festival, much of the world isn't going to come to your aid. So that's like what is super sort of confusing and troubling to me, is like, how do we help the Palestinian people? Because part of what we need is we need a couple of things. We need the people in Israel to stand up and vote out Netanyahu or seek political change. But we also need the Palestinian people to disavow and cut ties with Hamas. As long as the Palestinian people allow themselves to be attached to Hamas, they're going to get decimated every time Hamas does something. It's the same with the far lefties. Like, I tried to appeal with people today in the last couple of days about the Democratic Convention, because people were like uncommitted, genuinely wanted to endorse Kamala Harris. And I'm like, yes, I get that uncommitted wanted to speak and they wanted to endorse Kamala Harris and they wanted like their needs met. But you know what? Once people showed up with Killer Kamala signs and Holocaust Harris signs that were saying they were part of this pro-Palestinian movement, once those people showed up with megaphones calling Kamala a genocider, uncommitted were done, bro. They were done. Their demands were not going to get met. They were not going to speak. Kamala was not going to meet any of their needs. She was going to walk away from them, because whether the people holding the Holocaust Harris signs were part of uncommitted or not, they were on the same side. So if uncommitted comes to Kamala and says, I want to endorse you, but some of the people on the same side as uncommitted are out there holding Holocaust Harris signs, Kamala Harris is not going to align with uncommitted, period. The minute uncommitted comes out and disavows the Holocaust Harris, if uncommitted went and protested the people that had the Holocaust Harris signs and were there staunchly in defense of Kamala Harris, they would have spoken at the convention. But the problem is uncommitted allows those extremist Holocaust Harris voices to exist adjacent to their movement. And so therefore they get kicked in the teeth because of it. And that's the problem. If you call Joe Biden Genocide Joe, Kamala Harris is not going to work with you, nor should she. I don't think anybody who calls Joe Biden Genocide Joe, I don't think the Democrats should be catering to those people. Dying to, falling bombs in Gaza is horror. It is a tragedy. It is. But that is not Joe Biden's fault. What Joe Biden did was he saw an ally of his whose a bunch of kids went to a music festival and got tortured and murdered. And when the parental figure of those kids came to Joe Biden and said, my God, they just murdered a bunch of people at this music festival, Joe Biden said, what do you need? I'll give you anything you need. And dude, that ain't genocide right there. Netanyahu may want to do a genocide, and Hamas wants to do a genocide, but Joe Biden said, we had an ally that had a bunch of innocent kids murdered, and I'm going to help him protect his people. I'm going to help him ensure that that never happens again. That's what Joe Biden did. And so I feel like calling Joe Biden Genocide Joe, it reminds me of the anti-abortion movement in the 80s, where anybody who worked at an abortion clinic or said abortion clinics were okay were automatically baby killers. And so the far left, though, once they start that, like, I don't know how they come back from that. Joe Biden is not committing genocide. Joe Biden is trying to help an ally never again lose 1,000 kids at a music festival. That's what Joe Biden was doing. A very strategic ally and a linchpin of our Middle East presence. And Joe Biden was being a steadfast ally to them while they defended a horrific attack perpetrated against innocent citizens in their country. Now, if you want to get into Netanyahu wanting to commit a genocide and eradicate Palestinians, and Hamas wanting to eradicate all Jews and wanting a genocide, yes, I will give you that Netanyahu and Hamas, and there are certainly probably some Jewish people and some Palestinians that do want to genocide each other, for sure. That is true. But Joe Biden defending an ally is not perpetrating a genocide, because Joe Biden wouldn't have done it if they hadn't attacked that music festival. If there had been no attack on Israel, no music festival slaughter, and Bibi just came to Joe Biden and said, I want you to give me all the bombs you have, we're going to go in and just decimate Gaza, Joe Biden would not have said yes to that. If he had said, we're just going to wipe out all the Palestinians, Joe Biden would not have been down with that. But once a group of people from that region murdered kids at a music festival, Joe Biden was going to give them everything he had. And I, to a degree, I do understand why he would do that. Now, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have groups murdering people at a music festival. But my question is this, can we focus on the Hamas side? Is that allowed in this discussion? Like, how do we get Hamas to stop massacring people at music festivals and other such things? Like, when will they stop doing that? Because it seems like Hamas and Hezbollah and, ISIS, it seems like some of these groups are a little bit prone to going out and massacring innocent civilians to make some type of political statement. That's not all Palestinian people, but certainly there are terrorist groups that are part of this Islamic, war machine in that part of the country. There are some terrorist groups that seem to have a bit of a habitual behavior issue of like wanting to extract some type of political objective through the murdering of completely innocent people. And I don't know that is ever going to have a successful outcome. I'm not sure that cause is on fully stable ground. That cause is on some shaky foundations. And now I've been getting called a baby killer and shit. But I'm like, bro, I just don't know what you want to do. First you said it was all Joe Biden, and now they're turning it on Kamala Harris. And then after Kamala Harris, they're going to turn it on the next leader. They're forever going to hate all the leaders. I mean, I want somebody to explain that to me, because I would imagine in order to think it's okay, you have had to created some level of justification in your head that what Hamas did to those people was okay to you. I don't know, dude. It's so hard. I just don't understand why Hamas murdered innocent people. I don't understand how people, I guess if you are overlooking that music festival attack, you have to convince yourself somehow that Israel has so been the oppressor that now Hamas just has a right to go around killing innocent people because Israel deserves it. And I disagree with that sentiment. I think property damage, burning down some buildings, mass protests, and making international appeals for help are all totally okay and good. But going around murdering people because of your oppression, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I don't agree going around murdering people is the answer. I don't think that's responsible steps made towards solving the issue of oppression. Murdering innocent people who had nothing to do with your personal oppression to make a statement against your oppressor is never going to work out well for you. That is not a coherent, cause-furthering mode of action. You know what I'm saying? I don't think I'm crazy for thinking that way.